Thank you, Vice President. And now we start the panel part of the discussion. We'll get to the nitty-gritty of it. And I might call now Ilias Chakadaris from Sky Television, who will be moderating the first panel. Maria da Grazia Carvalho, a member member of the European Parliament, European People's Party from Portugal. Angelos Stangos from Kathimerini in Greece. Thodoros Kyllakakis, member of the European Parliament, Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe from Greece. Valeria De Rosa from Radio 24, Italy, and Takis Hatzigeorgiou, member of the European Parliament for Cyprus, with the European United Left, Northern Green Left. The subject of the first panel touches the heart of the matter, so we thought it is the basis for the discussion: how to overcome the crisis and launch economic recovery. Ilias.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the event. Allow me a few brief thoughts about the event and about the first panel. The event is called South for Growth, and the expression and the title itself express some kind of solidarity, which is good, because that has not always been the case. I remind everyone the first phases of this crisis and the line of arguments: we are not Greece, we are not this, we are not that. So the solidarity is a good thing, and it's good not to create yet another front inside the European Union, as the distinguished speaker said before me, South against the North. But it's very important because by realizing what the role of each country is, or a group of countries, it is more helpful in order to know where Europe is headed in general. But I will come to that in a bit. The panel's discussion is how we overcome crisis and relaunch growth, rather. And it was also said that this implies growth. And the growth implies trust. Trust is the key element here, and it has eroded in all levels, in Europe, in the world, inside Greece, inside the society. And basically it's a very political process to rebuild this trust. However, I have to say that we are in a better place compared to 3, 4, or 5 years ago, because now we have realized what the issue, what the problem is. Last week, the US Treasury had a scathing report about Germany's approach towards the crisis, which underlined how much this dialogue hasn't even started. Yet, it has put the core issue of the European Union on the table, and I hope that this is something that will be discussed here. On one hand, it seems a dialogue between two deaf people, half asking Germany to increase its demand, to absorb products, to absorb services from the periphery, such as Greece. Germany says that if we were not as prudent so far, you wouldn't have anyone to count to now. However, the issue is there. How much competitiveness is too much? How much it stifles some members of the European Union, and how this can be overcome, basically. So, of course, that does not let off the hook the southern countries, but I think, and I conclude with that, it stresses the need to define the future of Europe today, not with rosy or abstract terms, but what we expect from Europe to become without political grey areas, so that every country or every group of countries knows the set of rules, knows what they have to do, and what they can expect. Because so far, this was all a lot not very specific, and I think it was very damaging for the effort to relaunch growth. For these reasons, and I keep the list of the organizers, we have a distinguished panel with Maria de Grassa Carvalho from the European People's Party, Thodoros Kyllakakis from the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats of Europe, Mr. Hadjigeorgiou from Cyprus, also Mrs. Valeria de Rosas is a reporter for Il Sole 24 Ore, and Angelos Tangos from Kathimerini, a columnist and a special advisor to the newspaper. I would like to give the floor first to Mrs. Carvalho, and we will have the chance to have questions afterwards. There will be an internal discussion within the panel, and of course I want to remind that you can also use Twitter, the hashtag South4growth, for questions or comments that you would like to be relayed. Thank you very much, Ms. Carvalho.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank the organizers and to congratulate the Athens Information Office for an event that is already very successful. I will divide this statement in three short parts. One, the context of the crisis. The second, the situation, very shortly, the situation in Portugal. And the last one, what we need to do in the future, both at European terms and inside Portugal. In my opinion, the crisis is not an European crisis only, it's a global crisis that has followed a very profound technological revolution. Like it has happened many times in history, the crisis have followed after industrial or technological revolutions, and this is the case. We had an information technology revolution with a lot of positive effects, but has changed and shaped a different world. The world has become much more multipolar. We have a redistribution of wealth. We have a redistribution of industrial production, of knowledge production. We have parts of the world that have opened up and now are completely open and competing. And Europe and other parts of the world had to adapt to this new situation. Of course, inside Europe, there are countries that are more adequate to adapt to this new situation, the one that have more industrial competitiveness, and some countries like my own in the south, that we had some positive points like education and research. We have very good indicators on that, but we still lack industrial competitiveness, and we had difficulties to adapt to this new situation. In general terms, Europe continues to be the leader in several industrial areas, like the automotive industry, mainly due to Germany, but also in certain way France, chemical industry. But for example, in areas, we continue to be in certain areas of energy, but in other areas in the energy technology, we have lost we lost this leadership. And for example, in the pharmaceutical industry, we are losing, for example, in terms of clinical trials, per year, we have 25% less of clinical trials that are done in Europe and are done somewhere else in the world. And this is mainly due that we have fast-growing countries, mainly in Southeast Asia, but not only, emerging countries that are competing with us, and we have to adapt and we have to have the means to adapt to this new situation. In Portugal, we had in the years of 2007, 2008, and 2009 probably an answer to the crisis that probably was not the most adequate. We borrow a lot of, we increased the public debt and the private debt in order to answer to the global crisis, and we had an accumulation of debt over a very short period. So therefore, at a certain moment in 2011, we had to request financial assistance from the EU and to the IMF. And we had an agreement in May 2011 of an economic adjustment program with a fiscal consolidation strategy supported by structural fiscal measures to reduce the public debt and deficit, measures to ensure the stability of the financial sector, and structural reforms to promote growth and jobs. So how is the process going in Portugal at the moment? The program remains broadly on track with the government and authorities determined to achieve their objectives. We have gone through 9 reviews. We still need to undergo through other 3 until May, June 2014. So our program is supposed to finish in the summer, before the summer 2014. The 9 reviews have been all positive, and we have for this year a fiscal deficit target of 5.5% of GDP, which is within reach, and we have for next year 4%, and for 2015 3%. Our public debt remains sustainable, but it's very high. Is to expect to have a peak in the end of this year of 127.8% of GDP, and to decline after. We still, to have these 3 positive, the ones that are remaining, positive revisions from the Troika, we have an uncertainty, and this uncertainty, probably you have read in the international media, is related to our constitutional court, because our new budget for 2014 is a very severe budget, and some of the measures can be considered. We will see what is the opinion of the Constitutional Court, unconstitutional, and there we will have the government will have a problem to replace these measures. On our biggest problem has been unemployment. The unemployment has been higher than foreseen in the beginning. However, in the last 3 months, we had a slight decrease. We have now 16.3. We had a maximum in April of 17.8%. For this, we have the tourism has contributed a lot for this. Again, a consequence of the globalization, so we are benefiting from problems in other areas of the world, in Tunisia and Egypt, and that had less tourism, and they have been going to Portugal and Spain. But not only, we are increasing our exports, so we have a good behavior of our SMEs and exports. And we hope that these 3 months will be sustained. We need to see if there is a sustainability on this decrease of the unemployment rate, and also on the recession was not as big as it was foreseen for this year. We will contract 1.8% in 2013, so less 0.5 than was foreseen, and we are already foreseen 0.8, an increase of the GDP of 0.8% in 2014. It's small, but in certain way is a turning point, and we hope that this will be a reality. Just to tell you that we had 2 other interventions at that time of the IMF alone, in 77 and 78, 83 and 85, and the adjustment in certain way was similar to what we have been undergoing now. The difference is that was much quicker, much faster, because we had the escudo, so there was a powerful ways to do it, but were very violent because we had very severe devaluation of the escudo from one day to the other, about 30%, severe cuts in the public services. So it's the 3rd time in my lifetime that we have the IMF and the international intervention in Portugal. Now, the future. We need to start growing, and from the 0.8 we need to go to 2-3%. And it's very difficult. It's a vicious circle, because with an unemployment of 16%, and very high rates, VAT of 23%, it's very difficult to grow. At European level, as President Schulz said, the banking union is fundamental in order to have finance to our economy. We need to complete the internal market, the digital market, the energy market. We should enlarge our market to our neighbors. Turkey is an example, but also the transatlantic negotiations that with the US can be very important to enlarge our market. We should continue to invest at the European level in science, innovation and education. We should not cut in these areas. We should create a favorable environment for the SMEs, for investing, for foreign investing in the countries, and for innovation. We should have less bureaucracy. In my opinion, bureaucracy is a barrier for growth, it's a barrier for SMEs to employ people. We should have better market conditions, more competition. In some countries like my own, we still need to have better competition rules, and we should go back to a business-friendly tax system that we don't have at the moment. But we need to cut these vicious circles and something target faster that we could inject in our society in order to start having jobs and to start the growth again. And in my opinion, this will come from the European funds. We have a new budget starting January 2014, and the member states that are now negotiating with the Commission, and they have a very important word what to do with these funds. They should immediately, in the beginning of 2014, start executing these funds, and to put these funds in areas that are important for growth and to create jobs, and mainly jobs for young people. And these areas are innovation, are SMEs, are science. So we need to do a quick, fast target injection of funds in our societies in order to reduce the unemployment, in order to be able to have less burden in the public
Mrs. Carvalho, I will ask you to wrap up a little bit so we have time for the introductory remarks.
We can go back to the growth and continue to all other reforms. So these next 2 years are very important. are the years that we hope to get out of the crisis, and we hope that with the help of the EU and the EU budget, we can start the path of growth and jobs again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Carvalho. I will give the floor to Mr. Skylakakis, who is the president of the Drasi Party and a member of the European Parliament.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I would think that there are a lot of young people here. I will go straight into the heart of the problem that we are facing today and the heart of the problem that all of you that are 20 or 25 or 30 years old will face most probably in the rest of their professional life for the next 30 years. What is the basis of the European crisis, and I would say of the crisis of the West? The basis is very simple, that maybe 20 years ago we lost two major competitive advantages that the West had compared to the rest of the world. The first competitive advantage that we lost was the fact that we had the monopoly of capitalism up till the end of the 20th century. We no longer have the monopoly of capitalism. Now we have big countries like China, which was communist, or India, which was third-way socialist, that are fully capitalist economies. And this means that we can no longer keep them out of the world market. They have entered the world market, and they will keep doing so, these countries and plus BRICS, etc., for the next 30, 40 years. And we will have another 4 billion people entering the world market till 2050. 2 billion people will enter because we will have 2 billion people more in the planet, and also another couple of billion that are now outside of the world market. They're doing subsistence farming, will enter the world market. Now, when these people enter, and we have already at least 3 billion that have entered the world market in the last 20 years, when they enter the world market, they don't care if we consider the 2,000 euros average salary in Europe small or big. They have 100 euros average salary. And they will try and compete with us in products, services, resources, till they catch or they are getting closer to our level. Now, we also had another competitive advantage in the West. When I was going to the universities back in the late 70s, early 80s, we had the monopoly of knowledge. There was no way that someone in China could have access to knowledge so that he can compete. Today, with this simple device, a young boy in Africa can have more access than I had at English University at the early 80s. So, what is the only competitive advantage that the West keeps? The only competitive advantage is its institutions, its governance. Because we know in modern economics that institutions matter, extremely much. And when you have good governance, then you can generate trust and growth. This is why, for us in the South, Europe is extremely important. There is no way that we can compete in the world in simple countries 10 million people in Greece, 11 million people, is not even a small province in China. It's a province of a province in China. So we need Europe for economies of scale, but we also need it for its institutions, which, though they have big problems, are much better than the ones that we have in the rest of the world. Now, when we realized, I don't believe that we have realized yet how difficult the environment will be in the next 30 years for the West. We are still contemplating that. And I believe that we have to move a lot faster than we are currently moving. First of all, we have to move into smaller states all over Europe. There is no way that we can support 50% or 45% GDP states in a global competitiveness where the others will come into with 25% GDP states. It's impossible. The burden, the competitive burden for our private sector is too big. In Greece, this is the extreme example, but I believe that it stands all over Europe. And we have to use our money, both in the States and in Europe, in a much more intelligent way. I am at the Budget Control Committee, and I can tell you that I thoroughly believe that the way that we are spending the money in Europe is extremely inefficient. We know it in our own countries, how inefficient it was in the last 10, 15 years. And if you go to a periphery in Greece, to a province in Greece, and ask them, how many jobs have European money really created in the last 10 years? Millions and millions, millions and millions of euros. How many real jobs have we created? And if we go in Germany, I believe it's the same. The same problem stands. We have been mobilizing, using the European money, and unable to mobilize private money for investment with that. Today, we should have been trying to mobilize with every euro of European money, 2 to 3 euros of private money to get investments. How much are we mobilizing in Greece? Maybe €0.5. No, it's even too much. Less than €0.5. So, and if you go to see what happens with the money, you will see ports that are left unopened because they are not connected to railroads for years. You see big highways that are empty because you have super fast trains running along with them. You see bad usage of European money. And if we want to defeat the Eurosceptics in the next election, in the next generation, and to keep Europe going, you not only need a Europe that is united and cares for the people that are weak, the groups that are weak, you also need a lot more efficiency in how you spend. Because if you are not efficient, you cannot convince the northern voters to give their taxes. So you need a more efficient Europe. And this is not talked enough in our discussions, both in the European Parliament and especially here in Greece. We only ask for solidarity. But we know that we are not efficient. And we know that European money is not spent efficiently all over Europe. So we must also be protagonists for more efficiency in the way we spend. Also, we need to break the vicious circle of high interest rates and liquidity. Today in the South, we are destroying our economies because we have from 3 to 5% higher interest rates than in the north with the same currency, which means that investment is not happening in the south. We have a lot of unemployment, but not investment happening. And we are also asked to do a kind of miracle to do a creditless recovery, to recover without credit, which is, I can tell you, close to impossible. Close to impossible. But in order to be able to make a new discussion in Europe on how we will move forward, because we need this new discussion, we have to bring something on the table. And this something is more efficiency and better governance in our country, especially in the south. If we don't bring that on the table, we will not be able to convince the northern political systems or the eastern political systems that we mean business. And we are into this in a win-win project, because Europe can only survive as a win-win project. It cannot survive as a project of people that cannot communicate together and ask things from the other that the other cannot give. And this stands also for the North, because they are asking us to do something that is impossible, to recover without credit. You cannot recover without credit. People think that somehow money will be created, like the fish and the bread of the well-known miracle. I can tell you, money is not going to come into economies that are in dire straits as we are today unless there is a move from the European Central Bank to give money, more money, into the European economy, and especially in the south. And to finish off, we also have to have new institutions in Europe and be bold about it. I will give you one example again from the Budgetary Control Committee. We are supposed to guard the European money with an agency named OLAF, Anti-Fraud Agency. OLAF, up till now, has done maybe 700 investigations in the last 10 years. Out of the 700 investigations, half of them have gone to the member states, and out of them, half of them have ended in a reaction, a judicial reaction. Now, we are talking about European money and how it is spent. You realize that with 200 investigations, if you were serious, you could do 200 investigations in a province, not in the whole of Europe in the last 10 years. We are not guarding European money effectively. And we have to go much faster. We are now going to have the European Public Prosecutor. But I believe that we need a European FBI to be able to have a real fight against corruption and fraud in Europe. Because the local political systems today, as it happened in the US in the beginning of the previous century, are in essence unpunished, whatever they do in terms of public money. There is no punishment, both for public money and for European money that is being not stolen in the last years, and that has extreme severe consequences, because when there is high corruption in a big part of Europe, this destroys growth. This destroys our ability to have an efficient and effective state. this destroys the way that we use European money. And our own institutions are too weak to handle that. We need help of strong European institutions. And this can be an answer both to Euroscepticism and to the real problem that we have. So we need stronger European institutions, and we need more efficient Europe to be able to achieve a Europe that has more solidarity and more growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Skylakaki. I will give the floor to Mr. Takis Hatzigeorgiou, representing the European United Left in the European Parliament, for a quick introductory comment, please.
Well, Parliament means parla parlare, and you are right by asking me to be quick. I want to thank, first of all, the organizers, dear colleagues and dear friends, because this is the first time I see so many youngsters in front of us. Ready to deliver opinions, ready to act and to react on what we try to do in the European Parliament. The question given to me is how to produce growth. The answer to that question is not always straightforward. The how to achieve growth question not only takes a lot of different responses, but lately the term growth as such has become the profound answer to every problem related to economic policy. So what we first need to point out is what we mean by growth. During my intervention, I will not make extensive reference to economic data, but rather I will seek to look behind the numbers as what is, I believe, the root cause of this economic and financial crisis. My firm belief is that the economic and financial crisis we are experiencing has more to do with a breakdown in culture, values, and respect for institutions than with raw economic data. It's a result of a corruption within the banks and economic institutions in Europe and in America. A recent poll for the Davos World Economic Forum showed that 2/3 of people globally think that the global economic crisis is crucially a crisis of ethical values that calls for more honesty, transparency, and respect. For us in Europe, the crisis of values has been augmented in a much more explicit and profound way, threatening the very survival of the EU project itself. The second is about the Euro crisis turning Europe into something we did not dream of. From a voluntary association of sovereign states willing to give up part of their sovereignty for the common good, based on the values of liberty, equality, and fraternity, we are now witnessing a Europe that is more conservative, obsessed with harsh disciplinary fiscal measures, and intolerant of the smaller member states. Having said that, let's go back to my opening remark about what does growth mean. Growth is not just positive figures of GDP over the years. It is not just positive figures of fiscal indices, and most of all, growth is for sure not the access of a country to international financial markets. Growth is the ability of a society, country, to increase the living standard of its people, face the increased unemployment, especially among the youth, and most of all, confront poverty that rises dramatically, especially after 2007. Peripheral countries are in need of urgent action that will stop and reverse the damage wrought to their economies by the recession and the policies of the EU during the last 5 years. Economic, social, and political pressures are far greater, and so is the need for immediate action. Public debt must be confronted directly and effectively to make it sustainable. Austerity must be abandoned immediately. It is catastrophic for peripheral countries to seek primary surpluses to be able to repay debt. Public finances will have to be put on a different footing, particularly as public revenue is likely to decline in the initial period of applying an alternative policy. Tax evasion should be confronted decisively. Peripheral countries will need a thorough restructuring of their economies that would involve strengthening the productive sector and rebalancing the economy away from the service sector. Taking Cyprus as an example, remaining focused and strengthening traditionally successful industries like tourism, where we have evidenced, especially in the case of Greece, a substantial recovery, is one way to go about it. Such restructuring can be further enhanced by supporting the knowledge economy and developing our countries as centers of educational excellence in specific fields like. Another example here could be the launching of state-sponsored programs for supporting the expansion of business and entrepreneurs to emerging markets in our region, including the Middle East, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. The financial system must be placed on completely different footing. This process has to be reversed by reforming finance and turning it into a mechanism to support economic activity. For example, reducing the borrowing cost and extending loan periods for enterprise and households alike. A reduction of borrowing costs to enterprises will spur economic growth and create jobs. Second, enhancing the flow of credit in the real economy. For example, special programs for supporting mortgages for young couples can benefit the construction sector as well. Implementing a series of innovative measures by banks that may include the participation alongside other investors in the share capital of promising enterprises. Offering guarantees to SMEs and young innovative entrepreneurs. Implementing a comprehensive governance regime for banks so as to avoid the mistakes of the past and instill confidence to depositors. And of course, the further support of banks directly from mechanisms like the ESM. None of these policies is feasible without a thorough restructuring of the state. In the first instance, it is important to eliminate corruption and to break the links between the state and big business that is the fundamental source of corruption. Moreover, the state must rebuild its capacity to intervene in the economy, which has been woefully reduced during the last 3 decades, with negative results. Capacity must be rebuilt to deliver effective and equitable tax policy. 2 more final words. One for the Cyprus issue and 1 word for education. In Europe, we need an education strengthening our identity, each one its own identity, but at the same time strengthening human values. We need an education with global perspective. And today, more than any other day in the past, we need a solution on the Cyprus issue. Europe needs a solution on the Cyprus issue. Me, as a Cypriot and a member of the European Parliament, I will do my best, I will do my utmost, and I will never lose courage in order to see once more again my country free and united, united and free. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hadjigeorgiou. I will go quickly to Ms. Valeria De Rosa from Il Sole 24 Ore to give us her view on that. I will repeat to be as brief as possible so we can have a discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm a journalist, so I'll try to be concrete. First of all, I think that the biggest problem is the unemployment rates. I'm telling you nothing that you don't know and nothing that you already heard, but I think that without jobs for you, we have no growth and we have no south for growth, because I think that, and maybe I'm quite strong, but I think that with this kind of austerity, we are murdering a generation, because you study here, but you have to go abroad to work, to find a job. So Greece spends for you, for your studies, but maybe Germany or Great Britain will benefit with your skills, with your knowledge. And Greece or Italy or Spain or Portugal, the situation is the same. So I think this is the main problem for all Europe, not only for us, but for all Europe. And maybe a better way, a more efficient way to spend money is the solution, maybe, because the ways to invest in innovation. But after you have to create jobs, you must improve, you must grow, because jobs without growth doesn't mean nothing. First. Second, I think that we need market rules. At the moment, we have no efficient rules for our markets. And we need same rules in Europe, so in Great Britain, in Germany, in France, but we need to compare those rules with the United States, with China, with all the world, because without rules for markets, money don't go to real economy. So this is the second problem, in my opinion. I believe in Europe and I believe in institutions, but I think that we have too much institutions. We have too much president. We need one voice. So maybe we can think about one president, and after we need one fiscal policy, one tax policy, because too many times countries in Europe are fighting among themselves. So without one voice, we have no growth, no sustainable growth. These pass through less national authority. There's no other way. One voice on one end, and on the other end, less national authority. About austerity, I want to add that I agree that in the first moment we need order and we need numbers in order. I'm talking about deficit, debt, but after 2-3 years in Italy we used to say the game's not worth the candle, because the situation is under your eyes, and we need a change now. We need other ideas, because I don't think that We must always talk about money. We must talk about ideas. And sometimes we have no ideas of what to do and in which way move and in which way change reality and what we live every day. Before something of you maybe asked to Mr. President, Mr. Schulz, about Eurobonds. I don't know if Eurobonds is the right way, and it's a solution. It's one of the solution, but maybe it could be useful for us to hear about this way, the Eurobonds way. I don't know if the right way for all of us, all of our countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would say you said that there are no ideas. I would say sometimes there are ideas, but they're just discussed, or even discussed in a very not thorough way in order to count who is for this idea or the other idea and have a result. And I will come finally to Mr. Angelos Tangos, columnist for Kathimerini, for his remarks.
Thank you. I'm, as a trained journalist, I'm trained to observe and describe things. So the topic of our discussion sounds like the €1 billion question for me. The exodus from the crisis, the avoidance of a new one, and the road to the economic recovery has been everybody's dream in the Eurozone the last 3-4 years. This is true mainly for the countries of the Southern Europe, which were hit very hard by the crisis. For them, the crisis is still here, despite the fact that recent data show that Europe as a whole is recovering. The solutions of the problems that the European South faces are not easy, and only the populists from different sides declare that they have the answers, especially in such changing international environment. The symptoms of the economic crisis are more or less the same: austerity, recession, high unemployment, fast falling standard of living, lower and middle classes under tremendous pressure, diminishing state safeness, what we call in Greek κοινωνικό κράτος, a general feelings of insecurity, a general sense that what we call European way of life is disappearing, make the picture. However, the countries of Southern Europe differ among themselves. The symptoms are the same, but they differ among themselves, and the causes of most of their problems were different as well. In this sense, one can say that the recipe that could lead them to recovery cannot be exactly the same. Actually, they were not in the same structural, functional, and economic stage the good days, and still are not. Italy is not Greece, Spain is not Portugal, etc. We are told that the recovery for most South European countries will come through economic policies of dual track, borrowing a term from the late years of Cold War. The one track is the fiscal discipline, the austerity, and the necessary but often very painful reforms. This is the way for a country to get rid of its deficits, to decrease its needs for borrowing and finally its debt, and to become more competitive. The other track is the measures that it has to take at the same time in order to attract investment and to have growth. However, these two tracks lead to different directions and may work for some countries with substantial productive base and state machine that can deliver. Greece is not one of them. But for others, like Greece again, seem not to work. They cut their deficits, they cut salaries and pensions in order to be competitive and to attract investment for growth, but the experience says that all these bring more recession, even depression. The Greek economy, for example, is too weak to get out of the vicious circle by itself. There is growing reaction to the policies of austerity and rationalization of the administration, and the system has proved incapable, the system, political and social, has proved incapable to make the necessary reforms because of the political and social cost. There is no doubt that the countries of the European South have the responsibility to make the necessary steps for the sanitation and the revival of their economies. On the other hand, it is very important that the Eurozone makes decisions strengthening the feeling that it is one entity. Decisions which have to do with applying common rules on the fiscal policies of its member states, decisions that will improve the safety, the cost of money, the access to money, and the services of the banking system, and decisions aiming to help the countries of Southern Europe to recover, hoping that their recovery will bring balance and stability to the whole Eurozone. There is a lot of talk about the actions that are needed to help the weaker countries. All of them require decisions by the rich countries based on a European way of thought. And this is not easy, we have to admit. For different reasons, there is growing ethnocentrism and Euroscepticism in Europe these days, and this makes it more difficult for governments to decide on actions which cost for the recovery of the South, assuming, of course, that they are willing to keep the Eurozone together. We all know that there are no easy and short ways for the South Europe, and there is no general economic recipe for all of them. On the other hand, for all the countries of the South Europe. On the other hand, if there is a recipe, that is more and faster integration, economic and administrative as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stango. I just want to make a note of the contradictions that often come to this discussion. First of all, Eurobonds would be a good solution for European integration and the overcoming of the crisis. However, they need a level of political union that is a dream, at the best case, at this point. And there are other issues, more practical. For instance, unfortunately, they're very technical, but to know that the money is so cheap in Europe today, just 0.5%, but at the same time, the European Union, through its institutions, is trying to promote banking union that makes the banks keeping this money and not putting them. It's like two European goals that contradict each other. So I would like to ask a common question to you, and of course you can ask each other questions if you have something from the presentations we just heard. Do you believe that at this point the issues have been put forward in a very frank way for the European voters to take a stand in a few months' time? And I will ask the MEPs first, because I think that's the key issues. We're going to a European election, which is scary, because through the lack of interest or the vote, we might have a result that will show that most of the people are not touched anymore by the European narrative of a union, of a confederacy. So do you think that these issues are frankly and boldly put for the table, at the table for the voters to decide? And I will ask with you, but I would ask you short answers and feel free to interrupt.
There is an important issue in Europe. For example, European Commission that has the power of initiative many times produces solutions, very comprehensive, but that touch the national interests. And during the European decision process, you need to pass these decisions through the European Parliament, and most of the time Parliament and Commission pull in the same sense. But in the European Council, you have the interest of the member states. And many times we cannot put forward solutions like the Union Bank should be. We should have decided much before, in a much completely way, but there are national interests that prevents the European
there's still
solution.
This conflict of,
so we
between
need
national
to clarify
and
the level between European. Do you want a European solution, or do you want to have national solutions? And we need to pull all in the same direction.
There's
and
not much
still
time, I'm afraid. Thank you very much. Mr. Skylakaki?
I would say that we are failing to face reality in Europe. I will give you an example. We are talking about the European Youth Initiative, 6 billion euros till 2020. This is, for anybody that understands numbers, nothing. It's more an insult when we talk the real problem that we have, rather than a real solution. And this is the problem. We have more than 25% youth unemployment in Europe in most places. In our country we have 60%, in Spain a bit less, and we are spending such a small amount that is totally insignificant. Our inability to face the issues means that we cannot talk to people in real terms. We are like talking heads in Europe, and people don't listen because, not rationally but instinctively, they realize that we are not doing something. The voter cannot always react rationally. He doesn't have enough information to react rationally to what's going on. But he instinctively understands if you are talking nonsense or if you are talking real changes for his life. And we are talking nonsense. We are not handling, we are not realizing how big the problem is. We are diminishing it every day in our talk, and we are giving even smaller solutions.
And even, I will thank you for that. Even if we talk about it, unfortunately, it doesn't come across with the importance that should come.
And we are not going to the people to do the discussion. We are not close. The European discussion is not done in the coffee shops, in the taverns, in real life.
Even a voter, though, that doesn't have technical expertise can understand when he hears or she hears the same solutions or the same ideas again and again and again. Mr. Hadjigeorgiou?
Well, a few words on that. First of all, let me tell you that I personally know that I don't represent Europe. I don't represent that Europe anyway. I represent the leftist ideas, in my opinion, the most progressive ideas in the European Parliament. So I can answer by giving the ideas I do have. Secondly, I believe that the youngsters who abstain...
This was my question, though, for your ideas, okay. To make sure.
Yes, yeah. The youngsters who abstain, in my opinion, they participate. I support their right not to vote if they know why they not vote. They don't vote. If they give a message by abstaining. Third and final thing. We have 20 million unemployment in Europe. Imagine these 20 million people just standing for one day outside the European Central Bank. They will give the most powerful message to them, and they will change radically the policies of European Central Bank in a day. Why we can't do that? Because the powers in Europe who have to represent these people, we are all of us divided. They are divided in Greece, they are divided in Spain, they are divided in Portugal, they are divided in Germany, in France. We have to create a common umbrella and to ask these 20 million people to come one day and stand silently outside the European Central Bank.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to allow to my colleagues, Mr. Stangos and Mrs. Da Rosa, if they have questions to pose to the MEPs.
Only one. Why in front of ECB and not in front of European Commission or European Parliament?
Thank you very much for the question. I was asking myself for days about that, where to ask them to come. Well, if the answer is Commission and European Central Bank, then we will divide them in two, and I'm trying to combine forces. Secondly, because I came to the conclusion that European Central Bank is the power. The Commission is a great power, no doubt to that. And the European Parliament is the weakest part of this power. And we have to ask, first of all, to gain that power back. The Parliament has to gain its power. But let's say outside the Commission. Nothing changes really, but I ask you to think maybe it's better to come outside the European Central Bank.
Something changes because I think that the ECB has done a great work until here. You know that inside ECB there's a struggle within among the board because Germany and Berlin in particular has a particular way to see the situation and to behave. So I think that ECB until now has done a big work.
Well, we have absolutely different opinion on that.
Different references, so let's not keep it in the ECB role in the Italy issue. Mr. Stangos, you wanted to add something?
Italian anyway, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, we all know that there are a lot of weaknesses, contradictions, and other problems in the European Union. We all know that these problems have come out in the recent years before there was no such talk or that much talk about these weaknesses because these were the good days. We know, of course, that between European politics and the people are the national politics and the people that are attracted mainly by this politics, but I think that the real unification of Europe is a very long process. I will try to stress out that it took a civil war for the United States in order to become one country. We do it in a much more peaceful way. I hope that. Well, to start it. Before that, we had wars. So, and I feel also that our countries, the small countries at least of the South, will not have a future outside the European Union. This is what I would like to say.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there is any questions from the audience. Please. Yes. Yeah, the question will be in Greek. I don't know if you have the translation. Δώστε μας μισό λεπτό.
Άκουσα με μεγάλη προσοχή τη ρητορική όλων των ομιλητών και με πολύ ενδιαφέρον. Θέλω να θέσω μία ερώτηση στον κύριο Σκυλακάκη. Αναφερθήκατε στον όρο αποτελεσματική Ευρώπη. Αναρωτιέμαι ποιες πρωτοβουλίες θα μπορούσαν να ληφθούν, ούτως ώστε η Ευρώπη να είναι αποτελεσματική και αν αντιλήφθηκα σωστά, ο όρος αποτελεσματικότητα αναφέρεται στην ορθή διαχείριση των οικονομικών πόρων αυτής. Θα ήθελα επιγραμματικά να μου αναφέρετε κάποιες πρωτοβουλίες που θα μπορούσαμε να λάβουμε στα υπόψη.
Να απαντήσω ελληνικά ή αγγλικά, πώς θέλετε?
Όπως προτιμάτε. Σας καταλαβαίνω και στα αγγλικά.
Okay. Then I will answer in English, though Greek is always easier for us. We are spending 140 billion, 135, let's say, billion euros each year in Europe. This is just 1% of European money. Most of it is spent in an agricultural policy which is politically motivated. We are spending very little money in research and innovation compared to what we have to do. And we are spending on infrastructure in a most wasteful way. I can assure you about that. So, first of all, we must change where we spend it. So we must spend a lot more on research and innovation rather than on the other areas. And being a Greek, this is not something nationalistic, you understand. We are very weak in research and innovation, but we must be sincere and realistic. So we must change the balance. Second, we must change the amount that we spend. It's impossible to build a union with 1% GNI, gross national income. It's insignificant. So we need to spend more. And how can we make it more efficient and effective? First of all, we have to deal with reality. Now, we are not really discussing efficiency and effectiveness in Europe. And if you don't measure, we are not even measuring it. We are trying to get in the European Parliament the efficiency and effectiveness reports that the European Court of the Budgetary, the European Court, Ελεγκτικό Συνέδριο in our terms,
the state audit.
The European Court of Auditors are giving us after the Lisbon Treaty. And there is a huge reaction not to get these reports in the plenary of the Parliament. We are talking about the most democratic institutions, and it still reacts for our inefficiency and ineffectiveness to be known. I did a report, Mr. Iacolino did the report, and I did part of it on organized crime and corruption. And we found out, it was in my thematic paper, I looked into this data, that we have 20 million bribes in the public sectors, not 20 million euros, 20 million actions of bribery in the public sectors of Europe each year. More than that, it's probably closer to 30 million. And nobody's talking about it. 30 million bribes means essentially that in a 500 million population is a tremendous amount of corruption, and nobody's talking about it. And of course, it's impossible to build a proper state if you have this level of corruption. Here in Greece, only in our tax mechanism, we have 100,000 each year, and nobody talks about it. We are acting as if this does not happen. And of course, the first thing that you have to do to increase efficiency is to realize your inefficiency.
Thank you very much. You want to say something briefly on this aspect? Yes, please.
On the budget, as my colleague said, 35% of the budget is agriculture, 35% is regional funds, 10% is research. that is not as much as we would like. We would like to have much more on research. But on the 35%, the priorities will be decided in the member states. So Greece, the Greek government will decide what to do, negotiating with the European Commission to the regional funds. And there, in this 35%, there is a scope to invest much more in research and innovation in Greece and in the youth employment. We have the European Social Fund that is much more than the youth initiative, that if the Greek government, like the Portuguese government, wants, they can devote part of this to youth employment and to devote to research, innovation, SMEs, that are really areas that can contribute to growth. And they are deciding that now, negotiating during these months with the European Commission. So we hope that regional funds will be of help for these important areas.
I might say that maybe in Greece there is a little bit more disenchantment with European Union funds, because they have seen that their ability to change the situation is limited. More are needed to happen. I think Mrs. Podimata, the Vice President, had a question. Please proceed.
So it's, does it work? Yes. It's a question and it's at the same time an appeal to colleagues from the Parliament and colleagues journalists. To my view, there is no way to heal in a sustainable way the current ills if we don't touch on the decision-making process in Europe. There is no way. I mean, all of you said that the Commission is weak. Maria underlined it. Angelos underlined the need to promote unity. Thodoris said that there is a dialogue of, of absurdity, of depth, talking heads, which do not actually sound as nice as the real talking heads, nevertheless. And Tassos suggested that we gather the 20 million of unemployed people in front of the headquarters in the ECB. I'm saying that as far as we don't put as first priority to modify the decision-making system, to pass from the intergovernmentalism to the community method, which is the only method that can guarantee equality, efficiency, and accountability in order to give us the margin to modify eventual mistakes in the policies decided. So I would like to ask you, what do you think about it? Because again, I think that our challenge ahead of the May 2014 election is to launch a real campaign. As parliamentarians have a major responsibility, but the press also have a major responsibility as convinced Europeans, as citizens, to target this extremely crucial issue of decision-making. And then, Tassos, I think that we need to gather the unemployed people in front of the headquarters of the European Council, not the Commission. The Commission has been weak, but the Commission has been weak because the intergovernmentalism did not allow the European Commission to play its real, fundamental by the treaties role. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for another question, maybe. Please. Couple of questions. You want a question?
Thank you. I'm Christine, and I'm from University of Latvia. And Latvia, as you know, was one of the countries that was hit by the crisis the most. And right now, it is one of the success stories, and in 2012, it was the fastest growing economy of Europe.
Is it?
In 2012, it was.
No. I know, but I'm asking you because you're a Latvian. Are you happy with the results? Do you share
Yes.
this?
I'm definitely happy.
This is what I want to
Yes.
to understand. Whether you make a
And
distinction.
you could put me a little bit off guard, but
Sorry.
of course, we paid a high price for it. A lot of Latvians left Latvia, and a lot of people were very unsatisfied with what happened, but we got out, and pretty quick. And I wanted to ask you, why this kind of success story is kind of partially ignored in the South? Why do not follow the successful story, but to choose a different path? And maybe that's a problem of the political culture. Maybe the South should change the political culture itself. Thank you.
Definitely. However, I have to say, I don't know if someone else wants to answer that. The problems are different. The political culture is different as well. But the problems and the background of each country, where did this problem came from? Did the state get into too much debt? Did the individuals went into too much debt? All these are variables that change totally the situation. The political culture as well, it helps. Political culture or lack of it, depending on the country. But I will let someone else to answer the question, Mr. Skylakakis.
Very quickly. The difference between what happened in the Baltic countries and what happened in the South is that in the South there was a decision by everybody to do it slowly. So we spent about, at least in Greece, 30 to 40 billion euros for public consumption after we realized the crisis, instead of spending it into private investment. That was a major mistake, that we didn't go your way because our political system was not ready to take the cost. As simple as that.
The political system remains the same. A quick question before I wrap it up. The politicians in Latvia, are they the same today compared to 5 years ago? No. What percentage? We have many differences. At this point, I want to thank you all for your participation and for your presentations. Thank you very much.
Ωραία, ας ξεκινήσουμε σιγά σιγά, θα έλεγα, για να κρατήσουμε τον χρόνο, γιατί και εσείς θα έχετε υποχρεώσεις, και να πάμε στο δεύτερο πάνελ. Με ακούτε? Okay, I switch to English now. So the second panel that we are about to follow now is about how EU policies, having dealt with more structural issues, we are going to get a bit more to the nitty-gritty now and see how EU policies themselves, connected with the size of the budget, can affect the degree of growth that is going to be fueled. The moderator of this panel is Aristotelia Pelloni from Ta Nea newspaper in Greece, and we have with us Mrs. Marietta Giannakou, who is a member of the European Parliament with the European People's Party from Greece, Anne Cahill from the Irish Examiner from Ireland, Giampiero Gramaglia from Il Fatto Quotidiano in Italy, and Michalis Persianis from Kathimerini, Cyprus. Aristotelia.
Welcome from me too. Thank you for staying here, though I am seeing that many of you either have left or have gone for a coffee. It's a beautiful day. We're missing because of two emergencies, two of our speakers, and we are running out of time, so I will pass the floor to Ms. Giannakou and then the rest of our speakers. Ms. Giannakou.
Thank you, Mrs. Speloni. Since the beginning of the Eurozone crisis, the European Parliament has been at the forefront seeking solutions for the countries mostly hit countries of the South, and in the meantime balancing the interests of the EU as a whole, thereby safeguarding the prospects of European integration. As we are close to the next European Parliament elections, citizens should be aware of our workings and achievements. How did we address their problems and concerns? In what ways did we act in relations with the other EU institutions? Hence, we expect the citizens will make informed choices about the future of the EU at a very critical political juncture, and that they will foster our common commitment to political cooperation, peace, prosperity, stability, and democracy in Europe. The Eurozone crisis sets some unprecedented challenges for European integration. As most member states face the spectrum of recession, a great part of the European citizens experiences failing standards of income and living, while they seem pessimistic over short-term prospects. Meanwhile, unemployment reaches record high rates in most countries. The most disadvantaged group of citizens, the young people in particular, feel helpless in their effort to find a job and secure even a standard source of income, especially as welfare policies are running out of money. On these grounds, the ability of the EU to deliver prosperity as one of its foundation tasks is put into question. In consequence, this situation might destabilize the very high levels of civic adherence and trust that underpinned the EU for many decades so far. There are clear signs about changes civic attitudes. Indeed, most polls cast evidence that citizens expect more efficient solutions to the ongoing Eurozone crisis and concrete results to jobs creation, while some segments of the citizenry develop even a more sceptical attitude to the very scope of the EU. The European Council is well aware of this situation. As early as in June 2012, the Compact for Growth and Jobs was agreed. The Compact includes many important policy tasks and financial tools such as growth-friendly fiscal consolidation, normal lending to the economy, competitiveness, deepening the single market, completing the internal energy market, promoting a European research area, labour mobility and financing the economy, with more than 120 billion euros. All these add up to a timely response to the EU, but progress should be closely monitored. In a recent report of the European Council on these matters, the Commission highlights fields in which more effort is needed. Employment, for example, and the labour market is one of the fields that clearly stand out, and completing action is required. For instance, the EU secured 6 million euros for the Youth Unemployment Initiative for the coming years. But better preparation should be made at the national level for the most effective use of the funds. Other initiatives, such as the Youth Unemployment Package and Youth Guarantee, have not reached the phase of full implementation yet. Moreover, we can do more to facilitate labour mobility across Europe with regard to the recognition of professional qualifications and posting of workers. The Lisbon Strategy set the goal for more and better jobs by 2010, but delivered rather poor results. Compared to 20 million of unemployed persons in 2000, the same figure now has reached over 26.5 million people in 2013. The Europe 2020 strategy offers a more elaborate approach to smart, sustainable and inclusive growth in Europe. Citizens rightly expect concrete results with regard to unemployment. EU institutions and national governments are responsible, in accordance with their competences, to take up all the necessary action in order to pursue the perspective goals. The Growth and Jobs Compact makes evident that all the parties are fully aware of the situation and have already responded with specific actions. Moreover, the multi-annual financial program or framework will offer more opportunities for reinvigorating Europe's suffering economies. The way the EU institutions will deal with the thorny issues of recession and unemployment shall possibly have an impact on the progress and paths to the European integration. In the coming European Parliament elections in May, 25 of May 2014, we should do our best to tackle the issues that fuel the spectre of skepticism, cynicism, and intolerance over Europe by advancing the purposes of political cooperation, peace, democracy, prosperity, solidarity, and care for the less advantaged citizens. Finally, let me point out that the Greek people shows great strength and integrity in the way the Greeks deal with the effects of crisis. Recession led to a sharp decrease of the GDP by more than 25%, while unemployment reached the record high rate of more than 27%, greater than 62 youth unemployment. There is possibly no equivalent with any other democratic state in peaceful times. Nevertheless, the Greek society shows its great social capital, founded on the significance of the family and other forms of social solidarity that help people go on with their lives and face with integrity the grave effects on their standards of living. It should not be underestimated that Greece faces no more threats to political stability and social cohesion compared to any other member state with significantly less problems. Why, then, it is interesting to do business in Greece, to invest in our country, and thereby to contribute to this return to growth? Greece is a great potential and resources, scarcely found in other countries. First, there are well-educated people, skilled human resources that is currently undervalued as a result of unemployment. And there is a drain in other countries, but on the other side, there is the positive face of this problem, which is the open borders and the mobility of working people all over Europe. Second, the market in Greece is undergoing a major transformation. It offers opportunities for small and medium enterprises to transform themselves into the market leaders in the medium term. Third, Greece has some indispensable physical and material resources due to its geographic location, its rich and productive Mediterranean environment and land, well-developed infrastructures, and energy efficiency as a result of its solar and wind resources and the prospects of oil and gas resources. For all these reasons, we expect that Greece's return to growth is a matter of European and international concern and interest. Greek citizens and the government implements with difficulties all the necessary reforms that would safeguard economic stability, free competition and entrepreneurship, as well as the political environment, conducive to efficient policy making and sensitive to protecting the most vulnerable groups of citizens and maintaining high standards of welfare for all citizens. These are hopes. It depends to us to be reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Giannakou. This was like, on one hand, like an injection of optimism. On the other hand, I kept your remark on the cynicism and the Euroscepticism that might prevail in the Euro elections. But I will leave it here, and I will now let my distinguished colleague, Anne Cahill, she's an Irish. She will tell us later, perhaps, if it's true that Irish people don't like good news, that they have an issue with good news. She's a very distinguished colleague from the Irish Examiner, and she's been a correspondent in Brussels for many years. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. They do say the Irish are the Greeks of the North, and I'm very proud of that. We've heard about all the big problems here today, haven't we? We've heard all the big, major, intractable issues that I and my colleagues listen to every other day, and it goes round and round in circles, and there seems to be absolutely no way out of that. So I'm going to be a journalist, and I'm going to deal with very little of that. I'm just going to take one aspect of it, really. And thinking about how does the EU policies fuel growth? Well, at the moment, I believe that EU policies cannot fuel growth, at least not the kind of growth that promotes the kind of economy that Europe needs if it wants to retain its social model. We hear that the economy is improving everywhere, don't we, as a result of the current policies, and the evidence gives us a clue, I think, about what to expect from this improvement. We can just take Greece. Greek citizens, I understand, are on average now 40% poorer than they were before the crisis, while the very rich Greeks have increased their wealth by 20%. This apparently is a success. This is not just what is happening in the poorer or the programme countries. In the Euro area generally, half the population has just 6% of the net wealth, while the richest 10% own 50%. This is a result of countries like Germany allowing companies to pay tiny wages and little tax, and so in reality, taxpayers are subsidising these companies. This growth of inequality is helped by the very narrow economic model that has been adopted by the Troika and the EU institutions generally. We can see this not just in the programme countries, but in the very influential expert groups set up by the European Commission to advise them on legislation and policies. For instance, the Commission says that €1 trillion a year is lost to EU governments because big business and the very wealthy are not paying their fair share of tax. Now, 1 trillion would see you out of a lot of trouble, and it would certainly see us well on the path to riches for the rest of our days. So recently the Commission set up the Platform for Tax Good Governance to advise them how to resolve this problem and collect as much of that lost tax as possible. But apart from each government's tax specialists having a seat on this platform, 80% of the other 15 seats are taken up by tax advisors and big business interests, while there are 4 NGOs, such as Tax Justice, 1 academic and 1 trade union. Personally, I cannot really see tax advisors and their big business clients in this group, the platform, voting to increase how much they pay, no matter how much that would help the rest of us. They are more likely to favour a model that does not fund the European social system. Look at another issue, an idea that's seen as a real solution, and it was mentioned here several times this morning. to improve our economies, a debt redemption and Eurobills. This would unite the huge EU economy where we would help one another out. The Commission set up an expert group to advise on this recently. It's top-heavy with bankers and representatives of big business. There are no representatives from trade unions. There are no consumers, no NGOs that would maybe provide an economic view different to the one dominating Europe at the moment. This, of course, isn't confined to the Commission. We can see the result of big business lobbying in the European Parliament also, and, of course, in the Member States. This begs the question of whether there is any way to sustain our social model. Or must we reduce ourselves to the same level as the world's poorest countries? Is that the answer? Is the only answer to use taxpayers' money to bribe companies to fund their research without asking anything back for the taxpayers' investment? Is the answer to set up public-private partnerships that overcompensate the private investor? The EU is the world's single biggest market at the moment. We're huge. We're absolutely astronomical, but the only ones who never seem to understand that are the Europeans. And at the moment, Europe is not using our strength and our size to maintain our lead or our models. Instead, we are completely changing our economic model. And because people don't understand what's happening, they're not electing the leaders who can fight for them and argue against those who believe that a social Europe is not a rational option. Now that you know this, you can make your voice heard and demand that different views are taken into account to produce a unique European model. And this is something that you can do. You get onto Commission websites, onto the institution websites. They're very good as far as transparency in most of these issues are concerned. You can see the expert groups coming up. You can see them calling for the experts when they do call for them publicly. And you can write in when you object to what the balance is. So that's just a little thing, but I think it is part of the foundation of making any sort of change to the kind of Europe that I hope you want. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I'm sure that many Greeks, even the government, would agree with you that the economic model of the Troika is quite narrow. Couldn't be narrower, actually. And I will pass the floor to my other distinguished colleague, Gianpiero Gramaglia, from Il Fatto Quotidiano from Italy. And I'm looking forward to hearing his view.
Thanks, Aristotelia. Thanks to the organizers of this meeting for having invited me, and thanks to you for being there. There is a lot of optimism in this debate, so I will add a slight note of pessimism to balance the situation. The last news I received on my cell phone during the meeting was the national Italian GDP. Don't be worried, the Italian GDP will decrease more than expected this year and increase less than expected next year. So it means that at least Italy is not out of the crisis as sometimes we hope or we are convinced to believe. They were said a lot of things during this meeting. I think that everybody noted that words as growth, job, solidarity, trust and confidence were used by everybody. I will not insist on them, even if I think that restore the confidence does it mean in first hand, restore the confidence in Europe. It means in first hand, restore the confidence in ourselves, in yourselves, then in our societies, in our national institutions. And at the end of the day, the confidence in Europe will come natural from this process. We cannot start from Europe. We have to find something in ourselves at the beginning. To do that, we need concrete projects and proposals. We heard a lot of that, starting with the 4 priorities of President Schulz: global competition, energy, innovation, research, cohesion funds, youth guarantee, project bonds, euro bonds, a lot of ideas. Some of them are already reality. Sometimes we use it well, sometimes not. But to give coherence to all those projects, programs, ideas, I think we need what in this moment we don't have: a common vision for a better society, a common European vision for a better European society. When we have differences, we are often told that, yes, we have difference between North and South, between young and less young people, but we share common values. What are those common values? The national or the individual egoism? The equation between money and success? The corruption? The nepotism? Are those the common values we are sharing? Well, I think that we deserve better. Not we, this generation on this side of this table, but you. Because this generation made a lot, my generation, made a lot of mistakes and didn't use well the ideas who our fathers left to us. You deserve better, and you deserve revitalize the real common values: democracy, freedom, peace, justice, and to fight for equal rights, equal opportunities, and solidarity. But solidarity you will need after all, because you will already have what you are looking for. And to do that, and I'll be very short, and I'm finishing, I don't think that the right approach is starting with a sort of confrontation between South and North. It's not South versus North. It's South united with North, or North united with South, to do a better Europe. And sometimes we had in this meeting, even from the part of a northern man as the president of the parliament, a sort of leniency, let me say, lack of severity in front of the South. This indulgency is not a right medicine for our problems. We have to start to correct our mistakes, the mistakes done by my generation, and we have to start by admitting those mistakes and correct them. We don't have to ask what at the beginning, in first hand, what Europe can do for us. We have to start asking what we can do for us. And doing that for us, we will do for Europe. Thanks.
Thank you, Gianpiero. Actually, I didn't find it pessimistic but optimistic, your speech. And now we'll pass to my other colleague, Michalis Persianis from Kathimerini newspaper from Cyprus.
I always live with the illusion that I'm in the other generation, but nonetheless, I'll try to be brief, and that's why I wrote my comments down. I hope you excuse that. Now, true to its history, the EU reacted to the crisis by admitting the obvious, that it has failed to react in time and in a comprehensive way to deal with the crisis as it was developing and before it became too big to handle. But at the same time, and again true to its history, the EU learned the lesson and moved ahead to tackle the crisis with more integration. And the lesson was clear. Our problem was that the necessary mechanisms that would generate a single comprehensive European reaction were not in place in the early stages of the crisis. The banking union, a full economic and fiscal union, meaningful fiscal rules, and better protection of the market, that is mainly the consumers, all became part of the EU's reaction, but only after it was already too late. To be sure, the banking union and the fiscal union being promoted at this point are no smaller milestones in the history of European integration than Maastricht was. And in fact, with these moves, we're promising to finally complete Maastricht, which was itself a rushed and unfinished response to a different sort of systemic crisis. At the same time, however, there is something missing when we're talking about European policies. And I've chosen to identify 2 points. First, we never really had a real union, fiscal or financial. Consider, for example, this is one of my favorite examples, the country-specific recommendations issued each year. If one looks at these, a very simple pattern appears, and it's appeared long before the European semester, obviously. Each year, the Commission drafts its recommendation, between 5 and 8 for each member state. It sends it to the Council, where it's watered down and approved unanimously. And then the following year, we have the same process all over again. By my initial count, 86% of each year's country-specific recommendations are repeated the following year. And that goes to show you how seriously governments have been taking these recommendations. Now, this pattern is most clear in the European South. In Cyprus, we talked about the country recommendations, the country-specific recommendations for years before the crisis. And now they're part of the MOU, so for the first time we will actually have to implement them. But it's also true in Greece, Spain, and Portugal. Now, more interestingly, perhaps, the same is true for other countries like France, Belgium, Luxembourg, Hungary, Slovenia, the Czech Republic, and even Germany. So the first lesson is that a solid implementation mechanism for the problems that are identified should be in place. The European semester, together with the 2-pack and the 6-pack, are promising to change this situation. To the extent that the new mechanisms will be able to prove themselves as a means by which reform actually does take place, this is an important step. And in them we can see a decision by which the EU will support growth. But we have to remember one thing, that this new system has to first prove itself in practice, which still remains in the future. Second, in my opinion, more importantly, the single most important problem of the European South was never tackled. This is a problem that, to dare a prediction, will also become a pronounced and immediate danger in other core member states of the EU, especially France, Belgium, and perhaps even the Netherlands and Germany. And this problem is none other than the need for structural reform. The previous panel delved into the need for structural reforms, so I'm lucky in economizing my time by not going into that. Not only are structural reforms necessary, however, in fiscal governance, which is the mot du jour in the EU these days, but in a wider macroscopic sense. Aging, healthcare, social displacements, economic displacements, continuing globalization, and the new macroeconomic realities are shifting the mountains of the economic map of Europe and indeed the world. Governments unable to react to these changes end up stifling markets and especially SMEs, which is obviously a recipe for more recession, more stagnation, and not growth. Part of the delay we see in virtually every EU member state in reacting to these shifting sands is not only political unwillingness, on behalf of the politicians to touch these third rails of politics, but also the impact that such reforms have on fiscal figures. In the European South today, we can easily identify catch-22. Reforms are needed, but reforms cost a lot of money in the middle of a credit crunch and a sovereign debt crisis, which in turn underline the need for reforms. The European Union's transfer program, if I may call it that, was designed to mitigate the impact of the single market on the less competitive members. And in this sense, it's the twin sibling of the common agricultural policy. It is becoming irrelevant. But while SMEs, transportation, infrastructure do need funding, it is much more important for the EU to adapt to the new reality that will spell trouble for countries, all of our countries, North and South, for the next decade. The example of France, which was essentially prevented from moving towards badly needed reforms just before the crisis broke out, is telling in this respect. The main obstacle of reform, after social willingness was found in the face of after political willingness, was found in the face of social reaction, was the fiscal impact of reform. The situation is similar in the European South today, but only more pronounced, with the problems becoming more urgent and the fiscal impact more stifling. So looking ahead, this is the second major decision that, if taken by the EU, could bring sustainable growth. EIB assistance, protection for SMEs from late payments, better procurement policies and consumer protection are all useful and indeed worthy of mention. However, this umbrella system under which the EU extends payments, either horizontal or structural, to member states is lacking in this significant respect. We don't have a mechanism that will finance and oversee change, extensive reform, radical improvement of government spending, and the support for strong, real, functioning institutions, including supervision. We don't have a Stein-Hunderberg fund, a fund that will support reform. Now, the previous panel delved into this again, but Eurobonds, for example, would be a very good start, but nowhere near structurally what needs to be found. The memorandums of understanding, the programs for the European South, are seen, they are treated by governments and by the Troika as purely financial arrangements. But the most important aspect of these programs, aspects that would convince markets, that would build trust among investors, lenders, and depositors, that would lead to a truly sustainable growth and lower financing costs, thus making debt more sustainable, all of this is missing. And through such a move, the credit crunch would also be tackled. Examples from Spain, from Cyprus, from Greece are numerous. But most importantly, on the horizon, we can predict similar examples in several other EU member countries. Belgium, Italy, Slovenia, Hungary, and France are at the forefront of the candidates of the countries that will need these structural changes soon enough. This is a European problem, an immediate problem, and it can no longer be tackled with a solution devised under very, very different circumstances. Thanks.
Michalis, I think the discussion will start immediately. Yes, please.
Michalis, you said that it was interesting. I found it. We need a fund to fund a reform. We need an instrument to fund the reforms. But a lot of states of the European Union already did reforms. So we need a European fund to fund our reforms. We didn't do. So you are asking for an instrument in which others will pay for our reforms. Is that correct?
Part of the discussion has been, since this morning, spending on such things as regional development, the structural funds, and so on. And a big part of the discussion in the previous panel was how effective this spending is. In my opinion, it's not only ineffective, it's impossible to make it effective. It's addressing the symptom, not the problem. Look at Greece today. Greece has been facing this spiral of increasing taxes, leading to more tax evasion, to the point that the fiscal problem was never solved. And that became, to a large extent, a social problem because the least privileged classes paid more taxes than the more privileged classes, mainly because they couldn't evade taxes. So Greece got into this point where the Troika came in, forced more tax hikes to cover the gap. What Greece needs, in effect, is not more tax hikes. What it needs is a better tax collection system. That costs a lot of money, and it has to happen now. If you look, for example, at Cyprus, we're talking about a national healthcare system. That costs a lot of money. It promises to save a lot of money. It promises to lead to a more equitable distribution of national wealth. It promises to help the least privileged groups of society. But right now, today, we simply can't afford to do it. All of these reforms have a very high cost on the front end. You have initial costs. And it's no secret that Cyprus is struggling, for example, with things like computerizing the civil service. We're talking about better tax collection systems. The reality is we have computers that belong in garbage dumps, not in offices. We can't afford these, and part of the problem is this nature of these reforms. They have a lot of front-ended costs, which under these circumstances are impossible. My question is, instead of spending money on specific sectors of economies, having the EU pick winners, essentially in our economies, which is prone to corruption, which does not create jobs, why don't we help governments get out of the way of businesses? Why don't we allow governments to go through that reform that has to take place so that the economy can create jobs, more equitable jobs, more fair jobs, better Gini coefficients, better distribution of income, rather than just throw money into what is essentially a corruption pit in the name of European integration, for example, with TEN-Ts and other trans-European networks.
I will take Michalis' question before I pass the floor to the audience, because I would like to listen to the opinion of the rest of the speakers here, especially starting from Ms. Giannakou. And I will take your idea for a fund for reforms. Do we need a fund for reforms or just the political will, since the structural reforms are the ones that cost politically, usually, and are painful? So that's why usually the easy way is taxes.
We have a double problem. First of all, we have Europe in recession, and second, we have countries like Greece with a big deficit and a big debt. So if you have a big deficit, you have to have an austerity plan anyway. But never an austerity plan don't go directly to the growth. This is impossible. But anyway, we have to have an austerity plan. So, in the first time, we have such a situation. More taxes, but more taxes means more recession, less growth. And so that the exercise is very difficult. And I think after a period of austerity, the normal is to change policy. When you have you close the deficit and you have the money to be fair in your obligations, and that's the problem of Greece. The debt is very high, and for the moment we're not capable to be fair to our obligations. So you have to change the system to have less taxes. And on the other side, I agree with the representative of Cyprus Kathimerini. Nothing is well spending. For example, the money who goes with the cap to the agriculturers, and the money who goes to the regional policy never are coordinated. For example, to create a healthy cooperation, to share the spending for technological matters, to create an enterprise to produce juices from fruits, for example, or something, to create an area who can give a hope for growth, who can open the system and create a coordinated situation. So I agree with you that the money is not well spending. They know in Brussels. They know very well. I remember from the years of 80, we had a conflict for Ireland and the money they spent from the social fund for the facing of the unemployment. The same sickness exists today. So the Council and the Parliament says that they have to see better how they spend the money and the results of any action. If they can make a good evaluation and see clearly how they can spend the money in better way, it will be very good. But anyway, the health of the Union, economic and social, etc., depend not only from the money. As our colleague, the Italian journalist said, we share some common values in the South, as nepotism, familiocracy, and others, etc. This is true, and we spend always more money than we get. So it's not only the money who comes in order to cover some disadvantages. We have to change the way of life, and this is difficult.
Thank you. Anne?
Thank you. I suppose I have a problem with a lot of the concepts that are being used, such as governments need to get out of the way and allow the economy to create jobs. And then you're talking about corruption. It takes two. And governments aren't corrupt on their own. The economy, business, has fed into the corruption. They've fed one another. And you really need to take those apart and look at them. So you can't say, let's take everything off governments, it'll be far better in the private sector. We know that's untrue. Countries that have tried that are learning that now as well. A fund, like the EU budget is 1% of total GDP. It's nothing. It's zero, it's zilch, it's nothing. And even when you talk about agriculture, agriculture makes up over a third, but it does because countries individually do not subsidise agriculture. They decide to put it all into the one pot and let it happen out of Brussels. So really what we do need is solidarity. It was where it started. But, maybe some countries got too rich or other countries got too greedy. Ireland was incredibly lucky in that, we joined when we did get money, and luckily we were able to use it. But, just to raise debt at a lower price, I really don't believe in hitting a child when they're crying to make them stop crying. But I think that if a country is in trouble and they need money, you don't charge them higher interest rates, which is happening here. And the country that doesn't need help is getting money for nothing. I mean, this is not rational. across any sort of thinking at all. What you do need is solidarity, and you do need the EU to recognise that it's one unit, and let's get on with it. But unfortunately, that is not going to happen. It is not going to happen. Germany has said until she has all her skeletons in her cupboard cleaned, washed up, out of the way, and she knows exactly where things are going, then maybe we'll see a bit of solidarity. But then it'll probably be too late for us all, and we'll be into a different situation anyhow. Thanks.
Just a word. I agree that we need, all of us, all the 28 of us, need solidarity. But each of us has also to deserve solidarity in his everyday actions.
Thank you. I will take questions from the audience now. Let's take 3 questions for the beginning, and we'll try to answer them all. Yes. You first.
Την ερώτηση την κάνω στα ελληνικά. Ονομάζομαι Νάσος Δημητρόπουλος. Εκπροσωπώ την εταιρεία Ελληνοβεργετών. Παίρνω εξ αφορμής του διπόλου Δημοκρατία και Χορηγία Αλληλεγγύη, 2 αξίες που γεννήθηκαν στην αρχαία Αθήνα. Τώρα στην υποδιαμόρφωση.
1 λεπτό, περιμένετε να βάλω τα ακουστικά του.
Να επαναλάβω λοιπόν. Με το δίπολο Δημοκρατία και Χορηγία και Κοινωνική Αλληλεγγύη και εξ αφορμής της άποψη της κυρίας Γιαννάκου, που μίλησε ότι οι Έλληνες αντιστάθηκαν γιατί είχαν ένα κοινωνικό κεφάλαιο της οικογένειας και άλλων θεσμών, και ειδικότερα του θεσμού της ευεργεσίας και της αλληλεγγύης που γεννήθηκε εδώ στην Ελλάδα, φρονώ ότι έχοντας ως δεδομένο την καμπάνια στην Αμερική για την αντιμετώπιση κρίσης, την υπόσχεση δωρεάς των 50 δισεκατομμυρίουχων που επέδειξαν τη διάσταση του Bill Gates και του Buffett, έχοντας ως δεδομένο τον εμφύλιο πόλεμο μεταξύ Βορρά-Νότου πριν διαμορφωθεί η Αμερικάνικη Πολιτεία, πώς βλέπετε τη διάσταση ότι στην αρχαία Αθήνα ήταν υποχρέωση των πλουσιωτέρων πολιτών να συμβάλλουν σε θέματα κοινωνικής οικονομίας και αλληλεγγύης. Άρα στην υποδιαμόρφωση Ευρωπαϊκή Συμπολιτεία και στον υφιστάμενο ακήρυκτο πόλεμο οικονομίας μεταξύ Βορρά και Νότου, φρονώ ότι η επανεράρχηση αξιών και η αναδιανομή του πλούτου από τον πλούσιο Βορρά, που τα ελλείμματα του Νότου είναι τα πλεονάσματα του Βορρά, νομίζω ότι είναι το ιδεατό. Και συμφωνώ ιδιαίτερως με την άποψη της κυρίας από την Ιρλανδία και με την κυρία Γιαννάκου στο θέμα της αλληλεγγύης. Άρα λοιπόν το δίπολο Δημοκρατία και αλληλεγγύη είναι το αιτούμενο των καιρών.
Ευχαριστούμε. Πάμε στην επόμενη ερώτηση. Θα πάρω 3. Παρακαλώ.
Λέγομαι Παπαφωτίου Απόστολος. Φαίνεται ότι η παρουσία της κυρίας Πελώνη, μια ημεφέρουσα το όνομα Αριστοτελεία, θα μας μεταφέρει πίσω στον Αριστοτέλη και στην πολιτική και στην ηθική, σαν 2 έννοιες οι οποίες συνέπεπταν και ήταν ταυτόσιμες. Θέλω λοιπόν να ρωτήσω, επεκτείνοντας τη λέξη εμπιστοσύνη, εμπιστοσύνη προς τον εαυτό μας, εμπιστοσύνη προς την κοινωνία, εμπιστοσύνη προς το πολιτικό σύστημα, εμπιστοσύνη προς την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση, εάν πράγματι υπάρχει δυνατότητα να υπάρχει εμπιστοσύνη της ελληνικής κοινωνίας προς το πολιτικό ελληνικό σύστημα, αυτό το οποίο έχει κυρίαρχη ευθύνη, κύρια ευθύνη θα έλεγα, για το επίπεδο της παρακμής που έχουμε φτάσει εδώ. Αυτό είναι το πρώτο. Και δεύτερο, πιστεύοντας ότι η ανάπτυξη για να γίνει είναι μία έννοια η οποία δεν επιβάλλεται από πάνω προς τα κάτω. Απέναντίας είναι μία έννοια η οποία πρέπει να παρασύρει όλη την κοινωνία, να δραστηριοποιήσει όλη την κοινωνία. Για να γίνει αυτό όμως χρειάζεται μεταρρυθμίσεις και ιδιαίτερα λιγότερο κράτος. Αυτή τη στιγμή στην πατρίδα μας, εκείνο που βλέπουμε, το κράτος παραμένει το ίδιο, αλόβητο ως προς την γραφειοκρατία του, έχει όμως υποβαθμιστεί και αποδομηθεί σαν δομή ως προς την άποψη του προσωπικού και μπορώ να πω ότι έχει γίνει και χειρότερο. Με αυτές λοιπόν τις 2 παραμέτρους που είναι κυρίαρχες νομίζω και κύριες, μπορεί να υπάρξει ανάπτυξη στην πατρίδα μας και στον γεωγραφικά νότο. Ευχαριστώ.
Ευχαριστούμε. Άλλη μία. Υπάρχει άλλη ερώτηση? Η κυρία.
I want to thank you that I have a word now, because I wanted to say this before. I'm a PhD student, a PhD graduate, of a PhD engineering of NTUA, and I have written a progress evaluation of biodiversity and sustainable development using GIS, and this is a progress which is in progress. I mean, I have written the model and I want to use, but this model is ready from 2010. Until now, I didn't have a chance to use this model in the progress, and in order to use, it doesn't matter which country, but because I have begun with Greece, it would be better to begin with Greece, but it doesn't matter which country it will be. But the point is, in order to integrate, you need to have a unique union in order to have the chances. First of all, I want to say that you need to increase the cigarettes, because the cigarettes are killing people. And the second of all, you need to reduce the corruption, which doesn't have the chance for everyone, especially for the scientists, to having 3 master degrees, to have the right to do the good things for the Greek society. And I'm Greek, and the old aristocrat Greek. And the case is that I want to use everything for the European Union. Thank you for everything, and this is the case if you can use this model in the quick way, if there is a chance for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Raznev Petrosyan.
Thank you. Let's start the discussion. The first question was about the North and the South, and about richer countries that should help the poorest ones. I think you're referring to if Europe should be a Europe of transfers, not like the federal system is. But do we have a federal Europe? Anyway, let's start from Ms. Giannakou, and then we'll take.
We need another Europe, a new Europe, and we need it now. For example, in the United States, Florida has failure. Every year is out of any order, let's say. But there is no risk that Florida comes out from the United States. Personally, I'm persuaded that we have to have a real European governance, not a council with the intergovernmental system to thinking and deciding, but a real community way of thinking and deciding, and a real European governance. This is after the elections, but there is people like me and others, we believe and we try for that, we work on this. And the second was the confidence.
Yes.
Let's leave another one to do it.
Try to make a comment on, combining them. Gianpiero.
Very short comment on the North-South divide. This is not an historical truth that we have a North-South divide in Europe. And I'm not sure that the reference to the United States and the fact that they had a civil war applies to Europe. Europe in the last century had 3 sort of civil wars, and 2 were fought on the battle camps, and the last one was fought with the democracy instruments against the different totalitarianism, the Second World War, and the Guerra Fredda, the Cold War. And the divide in this case of Europe was not North-South. The Nazi and fascist totalitarianism divided Europe from north to south, and make a sort of break in the unity of Europe. The war against communism divided Europe between East and West. And we came out with a North more rich or able to provide reforms before the South, and the South which is now struggling with reform. But it wasn't always like that, and there is nothing which proves that has to be like that for forever.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you very much. Solidarity, it's not a zero-sum game, as we know. There was a recent, just in the last week or two, an economist in the European Commission brought out a report looking at some of these issues, and one of the things they looked at was if Germany had spent just 1% extra of its GDP, just 1%, what it would have done. Actually, it would have done quite a lot, not just for Germany. It would have increased, it would have fed back into their economy, but it would have mightily fed back into the Irish economy and into the other economies as well. But of course, all of this must be predicated on that we each have to clean up our corruption. Nobody can afford corruption. Even in the good times, you can't really afford corruption. And corruption is everything from tax not being collected, tax not being paid, to over-subsidising companies to facilitate cheap labour. All of that is corruption, and I believe that has to be cleaned up as well. Thanks.
Just briefly on this concept of allowing the markets to work, that leading to more corruption. Historically, when we take any country, any civilization, any state that declined, whether you look at Byzantium, whether you look at Rome, whether you look at Egypt, whether you look at the Soviet Union, there is a clear track. Institutions are the first thing that goes. Institutions decline before society declines, followed by the economy, and the state is the last thing to fall apart. When institutions, the state on a more holistic level, the first thing that goes is institutions. What we have today, and you look at Greece, but you look at Cyprus as well, is we don't have supervision. We don't have meaningful supervision at any level. And we've seen that in the most dramatic way in our banking system, but that goes all the way down to food labeling. It goes all the way down to chemicals. It goes all the way down to how we treat our labor. Now, when we say the state should get out of the way and let the market work, what we mean is get out of the way, but have good, solid, supervisory institutions, oversight institutions in place. This, by the way, is the lesson we learned in the 90s. This is not new. And the big dirty secret that the left doesn't understand, and the left convinced everybody, is that neoliberalism is still alive. It died. It's dead. Nobody believes in the neoliberal idea of the 1990s. Everybody believes in institutions. We believe in the role of institutions. So let's not confuse the idea of the state letting the market work with the idea of the state letting the market do whatever it wants without supervision. That's a very important point. My argument today is that we've been throwing money at businesses, and part of the problem that created is that was money that could have been spent on improving our institutions, which we never did. Now, just as a last word, solidarity, I don't know what it means. I don't understand what it means. When we say it, and this goes for us Cypriots and the rest of the Greeks here, we usually mean somebody should give us money. That's what we mean. And it reminds me a lot of that Amy Winehouse song. My friends keep telling me I should go to rehab, and I say no, no, no. Well, yeah, she's dead, and it was a highly autobiographical song.
But it's not money for free. It's just...
It's not money for free.
Of
yeah,
course.
But I mean, when we say solidarity,
It's a loan.
the question isn't only that we get money, it's also how and what for. And this is one of those cases where what is done is 50% of the story. The other half is how it's done, and it's just as important. I don't want to abuse my time.
Michalis was offended because I put him in my generation. So he cited Amy Winehouse that I couldn't be able to cite. I would cite Beatles at least.
Can I just make one point? Oversight. It's really interesting what's happening at the moment because there is oversight. They've brought in a thing called REACH that oversights the everyday chemicals. You don't really probably realise it, but your shampoo, your soap, your cleaning products are all chemicals.
Really do much.
Sorry, it's all there. It's now being dismantled. Piece by piece, it's being dismantled. Just as the financial sector wasn't regulated and they began to regulate them, but actually it's being the regulation there is being dismantled as well. And solidarity? No, I believe solidarity is that you give somebody a helping hand. I really like this idea of what's hell. Hell is where you're handed a spoon the length of the table and you starve because you can't get it into your mouth. And you never realise that actually it's not for feeding you, it's for feeding the other person. And that's what solidarity is. Thank you.
Thank you. You see, this is a very lively debate.
Throwing money away,
I will.
It's not
you can take it outside, afterwards. We have a lot of time, but not in this table. I would just like to add, for what Michalis said, that, we have institutions in Greece and we have laws. I'm not sure the supervision is the problem because our economy was supposed to be supervised being in the Eurozone as well. So there was a problem as well. I think it's a culture of, believing in the institutions, and maybe the institutions need reform as well. But this is a huge conversation. Unfortunately, we'll have to finish here because we have another table afterwards and I don't want to take their time. Thank you all, our distinguished guests. Ms. Giannakou, my colleagues, and please stay for the next table.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ναι. Θα αρχίσουμε και ό,τι προλάβει. Well, thank you very much all. Thank you, Aristotelia. That was a very productive panel. Lots of interesting things.